Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the pastel front doors of history and straight into the chemically enhanced chaos of the 1950s housewife. Forget self-care, forget weekends, forget being tired in public. This was a world where perfection was mandatory, rest was suspicious, and coffee alone was considered a personal failure. Behind every spotless kitchen and smiling apron was a secret stronger than Tupperware. Amphetamines. Prescribed, legal, encouraged. Maybe you think modern life is exhausting. Tonight's journey will make you grateful for every microwave dinner, every unmade bed, and every doctor who doesn't hand out speed because you look a little run down. Before we begin, do me a favor. Like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is. It is always fascinating to see who is tuning in from around the world. Now dim the lights, set your fan to a soft mid-century hum, and settle in. Maybe put on a pair of slippers that would horrify a podiatrist. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to be a 1950s housewife? Why cleaning the house required more chemistry than a NASA launch? Why there seemed to be a pill for every inconvenience, emotion, and vague sense of dread? Did people really believe you could vacuum in pearls without breaking a sweat? What happens when you're expected to keep the house spotless, the children spotless, and your own mind spotless, all before your husband comes home with opinions about the roast beef? Congratulations. You've just woken up in a split-level ranch house in the year 1957. The day begins before it's ready to be a day at all. Morning in Suburbia, 1957, does not arrive gently. It does not stretch or yawn or ask permission. It snaps on like a light switch wired directly to obligation. Somewhere in the house, an alarm clock rattles itself awake, a sharp metallic insistence that slices through the thin dream you were still clinging to. You don't open your eyes right away. You already know what's waiting. The ceiling is the same pale color it was yesterday, faintly pink or faintly yellow, a shade chosen because it was cheerful without being distracting. Cheerful is important. Cheerful is expected. The house itself feels like it's holding its breath. Even before your feet hit the floor, you can sense it. The quiet isn't peaceful. It's anticipatory. It's the silence before motion, before voices, before needs. You lie there for a moment longer than you should, already calculating the damage. If you stay still for 30 more seconds, that's 30 seconds behind. If you stay still for a minute, the entire day tilts. Being behind in 1957 suburbia is not a small inconvenience. It's a moral failure that echoes through the hours. You swing your legs out of bed and feel the cold floor immediately. Linoleum waiting to remind you that comfort is a luxury reserved for later. Your robe goes on out of habit, fingers tying the belt with practiced speed. You move quietly, not because you're rested, but because the house is still pretending to sleep, and waking it too early feels like tempting fate. In the kitchen, the clock already tells you bad news. It's earlier than you want it to be, but later than it should be. Somehow both at once. The coffee comes first because everything else depends on it. You fill the percolator, the sound of water loud in the quiet kitchen, and set it on the stove. The smell hasn't arrived yet, but the promise of it is enough to get you moving. Cabinets open and close, plates are set out. You glance at the counter and mentally add another item to a list that already exists in your head, layered over yesterday's list and the day before that. Lists in this house are never finished. They are inherited. The radio clicks on with a small burst of static, then settles into a familiar voice. The morning news drifts into the room, calm and steady, delivering information that somehow always sounds urgent even when it's mundane. Headlines about tensions overseas, about tests and threats, and words like containment and defense. Somewhere far away, something is always about to happen, and the knowledge hums in the background, like an appliance you can't turn off. Between updates, advertisements slide in seamlessly, promising better lives through cleaner floors, whiter shirts, brighter smiles. The message is clear even when it's not said out loud. You are responsible for maintaining normalcy, no matter what the world is doing. A child coughs down the hall. Another shifts in their sleep. This is the warning tremor before the earthquake. You speed up instinctively, pouring cereal into bowls that may or may not be eaten, setting bread by the toaster, lining up cups as if order itself might slow the chaos. You glance at the clock again and feel the familiar pinch in your chest. You are already behind. You always are. The first child appears in the doorway, hair pointing in directions that defy physics, eyes half open, immediately asking a question you don't have time to answer. Is breakfast ready? Where are their shoes? Why does today feel longer than yesterday? You answer what you can, deflect the rest, moving constantly so there's no space for the panic to settle. Motion is safety. Stillness is dangerous. Coffee finally perks, the sound sharp and insistent, and you pour yourself a cup before you've finished pouring anyone else's. The first sip is too hot, but you drink it anyway. Waiting is not part of the schedule. The caffeine hits quickly, not enough to wake you fully, but enough to pull you forward. The radio continues its soft barrage of news and jingles, voices insisting that everything is under control as long as you do your part. Another child arrives, then another. The kitchen fills with movement and noise, chairs scraping, voices overlapping. You are answering 3 questions at once while flipping toast and reminding someone to wash their hands. A lunch bag needs to be packed. A permission slip needs to be signed. A shirt is missing a button. Each problem arrives as if it's the only thing that matters, and you treat it that way because you have to. There is no hierarchy of urgency here. Everything is critical. Somewhere between pouring milk and wiping a spill, you become acutely aware of how tired you are. Not sleepy tired. That would imply rest is the solution. This is a deeper fatigue, the kind that feels structural, as if it's built into the walls of the house itself. You don't question it. Questioning implies alternatives, and alternatives are not part of the program. Exhaustion is simply the starting point. It's the baseline from which the day launches. Your husband emerges eventually, already dressed, tie adjusted, shoes polished. He looks rested in a way that feels almost theoretical. He comments on the coffee, on the weather, on the way the house smells faintly like toast and floor cleaner. He does not notice the calculations running constantly behind your eyes. He picks up the paper, unfolding it with deliberate calm, as if time itself is less aggressive for him. You listen with half an ear as he mentions something he heard on the radio, something about politics or prices or a situation developing somewhere else. You nod, because nodding is part of the role. By the time everyone is seated, you feel like you've already lived a full morning, and it's barely begun. Plates are passed. Crumbs appear instantly as if summoned. You wipe the counter again because clean surfaces matter, and because doing something visible helps quiet the sense that everything is spiraling just out of reach. The radio mentions another test, another warning, another reminder that the world beyond the picture window is complicated and unstable. You turn it down slightly, not because you don't care, but because you cannot afford to. The clock keeps moving. It always does. Shoes are found, then lost again. Jackets are located. A child announces they need something they've known about for days. You solve the problem in seconds, even though it should have taken minutes, and feel a brief flicker of pride that disappears as quickly as it came. There is no time to savor competence. Competence is assumed. When the door finally closes behind the last child, the house exhales for exactly 1 second. The quiet that follows is heavier than before, weighted with what comes next. Dishes wait in the sink. Beds remain unmade. The floor already needs attention. You stand still for a moment, hand on the counter, coffee cooling beside you, and notice your heart beating faster than the room requires. The day has not yet reached its peak, and you are already sprinting. This is the part no one calls unusual. Every woman you know starts her morning this way, or claims to. At the grocery store, at school pickup, at church, the conversation always circles back to how busy things are, how early the day begins, how there's never quite enough time. Exhaustion becomes a shared language, spoken lightly, laughed off, turned into proof of effort rather than a warning sign. You don't say you're overwhelmed. You say you're keeping busy. The difference matters. You rinse the coffee cup and place it in the sink, already thinking about the next one. The radio hums softly now. Background noise more than information, but still present, still shaping the edges of the day. Somewhere out there, things are happening that you cannot control. Here, inside these pastel walls, control is everything, or at least the appearance of it. As you tie your apron and turn back to the kitchen, the clock stares at you again, unblinking. You are behind schedule. You always will be. But this is normal. This is how the day begins. There is no written contract, no handbook handed to you when you move into the neighborhood. But the job description exists all the same, fully formed and universally understood. It floats in the air between houses, in the way curtains are drawn at the same height, in the way lawns are trimmed on the same day, in the way everyone seems to know exactly what is expected without ever discussing it out loud. To be a good housewife in 1957 is not simply to maintain a home. It is to embody a standard so specific and so constant that it becomes indistinguishable from morality itself. The requirements begin before anyone ever articulates them. The house must be clean, but not obsessively so. A spotless home suggests competence, but too much attention hints at instability. There is a narrow band of acceptable perfection, and learning where it sits takes years of observation and quiet correction. Dust on a shelf is a lapse. Dust on every shelf is a character flaw. The floor should shine but not smell too strongly of cleaner, because that would suggest you are trying too hard. The kitchen must look used but controlled, as though meals appear through skill rather than effort. Effort, after all, is meant to be invisible. Children are expected to reflect the household's success with similar precision. They should be clean, well-mannered, and appropriately lively. Too quiet suggests something is wrong. Too loud suggests a lack of discipline. Their clothes should be pressed, their faces clean, their behavior polite but not rehearsed. Any deviation is quietly noted, not as a reflection of the child, but as an evaluation of the mother. A scraped knee is an accident. Repeated scrapes are neglect. A tear is understandable. Frequent tears suggest mismanagement. The line is always moving, but it is always there. Marriage, too, is part of the performance. A cheerful marriage is not one without conflict, but one without visible conflict. Disagreements are expected to be resolved privately, efficiently, and without residue. Your husband's comfort becomes another measure of your success. His mood at the end of the day is treated as an outcome you have influenced directly. If he is relaxed, satisfied, fed, and calm, you have done well. If he is irritable or distant, you are expected to search for the cause within your own actions. The question is never whether the expectations are reasonable. The question is what you could have done differently. This job does not recognize weekends. Time off is an abstract concept, something discussed in magazines but rarely experienced. Saturdays are for deeper cleaning, errands, and preparation. Sundays are for appearances, for church, for maintaining the image of a rested family regardless of how the week actually went. There are no sick days. Illness is something to be managed around, not surrendered to. A headache is endured, a cold is ignored, fatigue is adjusted for. The house does not pause because you are unwell. Meals still need to be cooked. Children still need attention. Cleanliness still matters. Breaks exist only in theory. Moments of rest are unstructured, unofficial, and often accompanied by guilt. Sitting down for too long invites suspicion. Even if no one is watching, there is always something else that could be done, and the awareness of that fact keeps you in motion. Idleness is not neutral. It is a risk. It opens the door to judgment, both internal and external. Domestic labor in this world is not framed as work. Calling it work would imply effort deserving of recognition, and recognition would require acknowledgement of limits. Instead, it is framed as responsibility, duty, and character. A well-run home is seen as evidence of a well-run mind. Cleanliness reflects virtue. Organization reflects discipline. A smoothly functioning household is not the result of labor, but of inherent capability. This framing is powerful because it makes failure feel personal rather than situational. When something goes wrong, and something always does, the explanation is expected to be internal. You didn't plan well enough. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't care enough. External factors are rarely considered. A broken appliance is an inconvenience, not an excuse. A sick child is a challenge, not a reason. There is pride in managing despite obstacles, and shame in being slowed by them. These expectations are reinforced constantly, though rarely directly. Magazine articles outline the ideal day without mentioning how exhausting it sounds. Advertisements promise solutions that imply the problem is your approach, not the volume of tasks. Conversations with neighbors circle gently around productivity, offering tips disguised as kindness. Have you tried this cleaner? Have you tried that schedule? The underlying message is always the same. If something feels overwhelming, it's because you haven't found the right system yet. Even praise carries weight. Compliments are often conditional, highlighting how effortlessly you seem to manage everything. Effortlessness becomes the highest form of success. The more invisible your labor, the more accomplished you are considered. Struggle, when acknowledged at all, is treated as a temporary imbalance to be corrected quickly. Lingering difficulty is uncomfortable for everyone. The pressure to perform consistently without acknowledgement creates a strange internal landscape. You become highly attuned to small signs of disorder because they feel like warnings. A stack of mail left unopened, toys not put away immediately, a meal that didn't turn out quite right. Each one feels disproportionate, not because of its actual impact, but because of what it represents. These are not isolated moments. They are potential cracks in an image that must be maintained at all costs. There is no clear endpoint to this job, no promotion, no completion. The work resets every day, regardless of how well it was done the day before. A clean house does not stay clean. Children grow, change, create new challenges. Marriages evolve, adding layers of complexity rather than simplifying. The expectation, however, remains static. You are always meant to meet it fully, calmly, cheerfully. Failure, when it is perceived, is rarely dramatic. It doesn't arrive as a single event. It accumulates quietly, through small lapses and moments of overwhelm that you are taught to interpret as personal shortcomings. You internalize the belief that if you were better organized, more disciplined, more grateful, everything would feel manageable. The possibility that the job itself might be unreasonable is not seriously entertained. This internalization is what makes the pressure so effective. Surveillance does not need to be constant when you have learned to monitor yourself. You notice when the house looks less presentable. You feel when the children's behavior reflects poorly on you. You sense when your own mood deviates from what is acceptable. You correct these deviations quickly, often before anyone else notices, because being noticed is part of the danger. The idea of asking for help exists in theory, but in practice it is complicated. Help suggests inadequacy. It suggests that the job is too much for one person, which challenges the assumption that this is simply what women do. When help is offered, it is often framed as assistance with technique rather than relief from workload. Try this recipe. Try this schedule. Try this pill. The structure remains unchanged. Over time, the boundaries between self and role blur. You stop distinguishing between what you do and who you are. The success of the household feels like a reflection of your worth. When things go smoothly, there is satisfaction, but it is brief and quiet. When things go poorly, the discomfort lingers. You learn to measure yourself through outcomes that are never fully under your control. In this way, the impossible job description sustains itself. It demands everything while pretending to ask for nothing more than competence and care. It offers approval without security and responsibility without rest. And because it is unspoken, because it is framed as natural rather than constructed, it becomes very difficult to question. You simply wake up each day and try again, carrying the weight of expectations that have never been formally assigned, but are nevertheless impossible to escape. The promise arrives wrapped in chrome and enamel, humming softly from the corner of the kitchen, smiling at you from glossy advertisements that insist your life is about to become easier. Modern convenience, they say, has arrived. Freedom is now available in appliance form. Washing machines, vacuums, dishwashers, electric mixers, floor polishers, all lined up like obedient helpers ready to lift the burden from your shoulders. The language is confident, almost celebratory. Less work, more time, a better life. What the promise never mentions is that convenience does not replace labor in suburbia. It multiplies it, stretching expectations faster than any human schedule can realistically accommodate. The washing machine is the first to make its case. No more hauling heavy tubs of water, no more scrubbing by hand. Just load, turn a dial, and walk away. In theory, by hand, Just load, turn a dial, and walk away. In theory. In practice, the presence of a washing machine does not reduce the amount of laundry that needs to be done. It redefines what counts as clean. Clothes that once might have been worn twice before washing are now expected to be freshly laundered after a single use. Children's play clothes, once forgiven for a little dirt, are now seen as evidence of neglect if they linger too long in a hamper. Sheets are changed more frequently. Towels are washed more often. Curtains, once cleaned seasonally, now join the rotation. The machine does not eliminate work. It invites more of it. The same logic applies to the vacuum cleaner, that roaring symbol of domestic progress. Advertisements show women gliding effortlessly across spotless carpets, smiling as though vacuuming were a leisure activity. The reality is louder, heavier, and far more frequent. Before the vacuum, floors were swept, rugs were beaten, dirt was managed. After the vacuum, floors are expected to be immaculate, fibers lifted, lines visible. A crumb is no longer a minor inconvenience. It is a flaw that can and should be corrected immediately because the tool exists to do so. The vacuum creates a new baseline, and once that baseline is established, falling below it feels like failure. Dishwashers follow a similar pattern. Marketed as miracles of modern engineering, they promise to free women from the sink, to reclaim hours lost to scrubbing plates and pans. What they actually do is change the relationship to dishes entirely. Meals become more elaborate because cleanup is supposedly easier. More dishes are used because they can be washed automatically. Expectations rise quietly. A cluttered sink, once understandable at the end of a long day, now feels irresponsible when a machine exists to prevent it. The dishwasher becomes less a convenience and more a reminder of what you haven't done yet. Each appliance enters the home with the same underlying message. If you are still tired, it is not because the workload is unreasonable, but because you are not using your tools efficiently. This framing is subtle but powerful. It shifts responsibility away from the volume of labor and onto the individual performing it. Time-saving tools do not create time in this world. They compress it. They speed up the pace at which tasks are expected to be completed and then immediately replaced with new ones. Standards rise in response. Clean is no longer sufficient. Clean suggests adequacy, and adequacy is not the goal. Spotless is the new requirement, and spotless is a moving target. Spotless means no visible dust, no lingering smells, no signs of daily life that cannot be erased with the push of a button. Spotless means the house should look as though it is always ready for inspection, even if no one is coming, especially if no one is coming. The appearance of constant readiness becomes a marker of discipline. Time-saving tools accelerate expectations not just within the home, but socially. Neighbors notice how quickly floors can be cleaned now. Magazines publish schedules that assume appliance ownership and efficiency. Advice columns adjust their tone, offering increasingly ambitious domestic ideals because, after all, you have help now. The question shifts from whether something can be done to why it hasn't been done yet. Technology removes the excuse of difficulty without removing the demand. There is a strange irony in how these tools reshape time. Tasks that once occupied an entire morning are now completed faster, but the day does not feel lighter. Instead, the space created is immediately filled. Faster laundry cycles mean more loads. More loads mean more folding. Faster cleaning means more frequent cleaning. Efficiency becomes an obligation rather than a relief. The rhythm of the day speeds up, but the sense of being behind never disappears. In fact, it intensifies, because now there is no justification for delay. The language around these appliances reinforces the pressure. They are sold as partners, as allies, as proof that modern women can have it all. But partnership implies shared responsibility, and these machines do not share responsibility. They demand it. They must be loaded, unloaded, maintained, monitored. They break. They malfunction. They require learning, attention, adjustment. When something goes wrong, the burden of fixing it or compensating for it falls back onto the same person who was supposed to be freed by its presence. There is also the psychological weight of visibility. Appliances make labor more visible even as they claim to reduce it. A washing machine sitting idle suggests a task undone. A vacuum stored in the closet whispers accusations if the carpet looks less than perfect. The presence of the tool keeps the possibility of work constantly in view. You are never finished. You are simply between cycles. Cleanliness becomes less about hygiene and more about control. A spotless house signals mastery over time, space, and self. It suggests that nothing is slipping, that everything is being managed properly. In a world defined by uncertainty, where headlines bring daily reminders of instability and threat, the home becomes a stage for demonstrating order. Appliances are the props that make this performance possible, and therefore mandatory. This expectation does not ease with familiarity. As appliances become standard, the baseline shifts again. What was once impressive becomes expected. What was once optional becomes required. A woman without these tools is seen as disadvantaged. A woman with them who still struggles is seen as inadequate. The tools themselves become invisible, assumed, their contribution erased as soon as it becomes universal. Time-saving technology also erodes the concept of rest. If tasks can be completed more quickly, then rest must be earned through completion. But completion is elusive because the definition of finished keeps expanding. There is always another cycle to run, another surface to wipe, another improvement to make. The house is never done. It is only temporarily acceptable. This creates a peculiar tension between gratitude and resentment. You are expected to be thankful for these conveniences, to marvel at their ingenuity, to appreciate the progress they represent. Complaining about them feels ungrateful, even irrational. After all, things are easier now, aren't they? And yet the exhaustion remains, deepened by the knowledge that it is not supposed to. Feeling tired in a world of modern convenience becomes another private failure. The acceleration affects not just physical labor, but mental labor as well. Planning becomes more complex, schedules tighten, expectations overlap. You are managing machines, people, meals, appearances, all at once, all faster than before. The margin for error shrinks. Forgetting a load of laundry feels more consequential when the solution was supposedly so simple. The irony is that these tools do exactly what they promise, just not in the way advertised. They increase output, they increase efficiency, they increase standards. What they do not increase is relief. Relief would require a reassessment of what is reasonable, and that conversation never happens. Instead, technology is layered on top of existing expectations, reinforcing them rather than challenging them. Over time, the presence of modern convenience reshapes the identity of the housewife itself. Competence is now measured not just by effort but by optimization. How well you use your tools becomes a proxy for how well you manage your life. Efficiency becomes virtue. Speed becomes proof of capability. Slowness, hesitation, fatigue are framed as personal shortcomings rather than natural responses to an ever-expanding workload. The house filled with machines designed to save time becomes a place where time feels increasingly scarce. The hum of appliances becomes the soundtrack of a day spent chasing an ideal that keeps moving just out of reach. Each innovation promises relief but delivers obligation, tightening the loop between effort and expectation. In the end, modern convenience does not free the housewife from work. It frees society from acknowledging how much work there is. By making labor faster and quieter, it makes it easier to ignore, easier to demand more, easier to assume that exhaustion has been solved. The machines keep running, the standards keep rising, and the day somehow always ends with the same feeling, that there was never quite enough time, no matter how many tools promised otherwise. The morning pill does not arrive with drama. There is no warning label screaming danger, no hushed secrecy, no sense that something unusual is happening. It sits quietly in a bottle, small and clean and official, prescribed by a man in a white coat who smiled kindly and said you looked a little run down. America's quiet secret does not feel like a secret at all. It feels like help. It feels like permission. It feels like modern medicine doing exactly what modern medicine promised it would do, keeping people productive, pleasant, and moving forward. Benzedrine, pep pills, diet aids, nerve tonics, the names vary, but the function is the same. Energy bottled, alertness condensed. The solution to fatigue framed not as rest or relief but as chemistry. You do not take it because you want to feel euphoric. You take it because you are tired, and tiredness has quietly been reclassified as a problem that needs fixing. In a culture that treats exhaustion as a moral weakness, a pill that promises energy feels less like indulgence and more like responsibility. The prescription is almost incidental. You do not arrive at the doctor's office asking for speed. You arrive saying you're worn out, that your nerves feel frayed, that you can't quite keep up the way you used to. The doctor listens with half an ear, nodding sympathetically, glancing at the clock. He does not ask about your workload. He does not ask about your sleep. He does not ask what your days actually look like. He reaches for his pad because the system does not reward questions. It rewards solutions, preferably quick ones. Doctors become gatekeepers, not investigators. Their role is not to challenge the structure of a life that produces constant fatigue, but to help you function within it. You are not sick in a way that requires reflection. You are simply lagging behind the pace of modern living. The pill is offered as a tune-up, a boost, a way to bring you back in line with what is expected. You leave the office reassured, validated, and carrying a small paper bag that contains your ability to keep going. The language matters. These pills are not framed as drugs. They are framed as aids, supplements, helpers. Sometimes they are described as vitamins or as medicine that simply gives your body what it is missing. Energy is treated as a resource that can be depleted and replenished chemically. Like oil in a car, if you are running low, you refill. There is no implication of danger in that metaphor, only practicality. You take the first pill in the morning, often with coffee because that feels natural, because coffee itself is already a socially acceptable stimulant. The pill slides easily into the routine. It does not disrupt your day. It enhances it. Within a short while, something shifts. The fog lifts. Your thoughts sharpen. The tasks in front of you feel less heavy, less overwhelming. You move faster. You feel capable. The house no longer feels like an obstacle course. It feels like a series of manageable steps. This is where the quiet secret takes hold. The pill works. Not symbolically, not vaguely, but tangibly. The laundry gets done. The kitchen shines. The children are handled with efficiency and patience. You feel like the version of yourself you think you're supposed to be. The version that keeps up. The version that doesn't complain. The version that looks like she's managing just fine. Because the effect is functional, not chaotic, it reinforces the idea that this is not indulgence. It is treatment. You are not escaping reality. You are meeting it head-on, armed with science. The pill does not make you feel out of control. It makes you feel in control, which is far more seductive. It aligns perfectly with the era's faith in progress, in chemistry, in the idea that every human problem has a technical solution if you look hard enough. There is also safety in its legitimacy. This pill came from a doctor. It came from a pharmacy. It came in a bottle with your name on it. That official chain transforms a powerful... It is not something you are sneaking. It is something you are following instructions for. Take one in the morning, as needed. The phrase "as needed" is doing a tremendous amount of work here, because need is defined by expectations, not by biology. Fatigue becomes medicalized. Instead of asking why so many women feel constantly exhausted, the culture quietly agrees that exhaustion itself is the illness. The pill treats the symptom while leaving the cause untouched. In fact, it makes the cause more sustainable. With chemical energy available, the system no longer has to bend. You bend instead, chemically reinforced. The social normalization happens quickly. You hear other women mention their pills casually, sometimes jokingly. Little helpers, pep aids, something to get through the day. There is comfort in knowing you are not alone, that this is not a personal failing but a shared solution. The fact that everyone is doing it makes it feel less extreme and more like common sense. The pills also blur the line between medicine and optimization. They are not just for bad days, they are for busy days. For days with too much to do. For days when you need to be sharp, cheerful, efficient. Eventually that becomes most days. The idea of facing a full schedule without chemical assistance starts to feel irresponsible, even risky. Why struggle unnecessarily when help is available? Doctors reinforce this framing, often unintentionally. They are trained to alleviate symptoms, and fatigue presents itself convincingly. There are no visible wounds, no lab tests that capture emotional overload. Prescribing is easier than probing, and so the pills keep flowing, backed by medical authority and cultural approval. There is very little discussion of long-term effects because long-term thinking does not align with the urgency of the present. The present demands energy now. Tomorrow can worry about itself. The crash, when it comes, is framed as another symptom to be treated, not as evidence that something is wrong with the approach. Energy becomes medicine in this world. Not rest, not boundaries, not reduced expectations. Energy, artificially supplied, precisely measured, socially sanctioned. The goal is not to feel well. The goal is to function without disruption, to keep the machine running smoothly, even if the parts are overheating. The morning pill also changes how exhaustion is perceived internally. Instead of listening to fatigue as a signal, you learn to override it. Tiredness becomes an inconvenience, something to push past rather than respond to. The body's limits are treated as negotiable, adjustable with the right dosage. This creates a subtle disconnect between sensation and action. You stop trusting your own signals because chemistry can always correct them. The secrecy is quiet, not because it is hidden, but because it is normalized. There is no scandal when something is woven seamlessly into daily life. No one whispers about the pills in alarmed tones. They whisper in solidarity. They trade information. They compare notes. Which doctor is generous? Which brand works best? Which doesn't make your hands shake quite as much? This is not rebellion. It is adaptation. The pill also offers emotional insulation. With increased energy comes emotional blunting. There is less space to sit with dissatisfaction, frustration, or sadness. Everything moves too quickly. The day fills itself. Introspection requires stillness, and stillness feels inefficient when you are chemically propelled forward. In this way, the pill does more than energize, it distracts. America's quiet secret thrives because it solves the immediate problem while obscuring the larger one. It allows an impossible workload to continue without visible collapse. It allows a culture of constant performance to avoid confronting its own excesses. The cost is deferred, individualized, absorbed quietly by those taking the pills. And yet, at this stage, the pill still feels like a gift, a modern miracle, a small white reassurance that you are not failing, that you are simply adjusting. You swallow it with your coffee and step into the day already moving faster than you should have to, buoyed by the comforting belief that this is what progress looks like. Breakfast in 1957 is not a meal so much as a performance staged at high speed, and by the time the sun has fully committed to the sky, the kitchen is already alive with motion. The clock insists it is early, but the body feels late, as though the day began somewhere else without asking permission. The pill has dissolved quietly, efficiently, without ceremony, and now the house is no longer something you move through. It is something you operate. Cabinets open and close with precision. Burners ignite. Coffee percolates with a sound that feels like encouragement. Every action has momentum, and momentum feels like control. The kitchen smells sharp and warm all at once, coffee bitterness cutting through bacon fat, toast just beginning to color, the faint chemical sweetness of cleaner still lingering from the night before. Your hands move before your thoughts finish forming. Eggs crack cleanly, shells discarded without hesitation. The skillet is already hot because waiting feels unnecessary, almost irritating. You stir, flip, reach, and adjust, all while keeping track of time in a way that feels intuitive rather than conscious. Minutes are not counted, they are sensed. This is where the pill reveals its true talent. Not energy alone, but focus sharpened into something almost mechanical. Tasks line up neatly in your mind, ordered, prioritized, and ready to be executed. While bacon sizzles, lunches are assembled. While toast pops, cereal bowls are set out. Napkins folded, milk poured. There is no pause between actions. Pauses feel wrong, like dropped stitches in a pattern that must remain intact. Multitasking is no longer effortful. It feels natural, even elegant. You stir oatmeal while listening to the radio, absorb headlines about distant threats and political tension without slowing your movements. Words like Cold War and atomic drift through the kitchen, abstract and constant, a low-level hum of unease that pairs strangely well with the hum of appliances. Anxiety, both global and personal, becomes background noise, something you live alongside rather than confront directly. The children appear in stages, sleepy and rumpled, moving slower than the day demands. Their presence adds complexity, but not friction. You anticipate their needs before they articulate them. Shoes are found, shirts are corrected, hair is smoothed. Each small correction feels like maintenance rather than care, adjustments made to keep the system running smoothly. You speak quickly but kindly, issuing instructions disguised as encouragement. Eat this. Hurry up. Don't forget. Your voice sounds calm because calm is part of the role, even when your heart is already beating faster than the situation requires. Your husband enters the kitchen as if stepping onto a stage where the set is already complete. He does not see the speed that built it. He sees the result. Breakfast on the table, coffee ready, children mostly contained. The efficiency is so seamless it appears effortless, and effortlessness is mistaken for ease. He comments on how organized things feel this morning, how smoothly everything is running. The compliment lands like confirmation, proof that the system works, proof that you are doing this correctly. He does not know about the pill, or perhaps he does, but only in the abstract. Something the doctor prescribed, something harmless, something that helps. It does not register as the engine driving the entire operation. It is invisible by design. What matters is the output, not the mechanism. Eggs are cooked, shirts are ironed. The morning unfolds without visible struggle. That is success. The children eat quickly, or not quickly enough, and you adjust accordingly. A plate is cleared before it's finished. A spill is wiped without comment. There is no time to linger on irritation, because irritation would slow you down. Emotions that do not serve efficiency are bypassed automatically. You are not suppressing them consciously. They simply do not rise to the surface when the pace is this fast. Productivity becomes a physical sensation. It feels good, not restful, but satisfying. There is a subtle pleasure in how much you can accomplish in such a short window of time. The checklist in your head shortens rapidly, items crossed off almost as soon as they appear. Breakfast is no longer a single task. It is a cluster of achievements compressed into an hour that feels both long and impossibly short. The radio shifts to music, cheerful and insistent, reinforcing the rhythm you're already following. The beat matches your movements. You tap a foot while reaching for a clean dish. You hum without realizing it. This is not joy exactly, but it mimics joy well enough to be convincing. It keeps everything light, forward-moving, manageable. The speed intensifies as the departure deadline approaches. Lunch boxes are sealed. Papers are signed. Shoes are tied with a firmness that borders on urgency. There is a brief moment where everything converges, where multiple demands peak at once, and instead of overwhelm, you feel clarity. The pill excels here. It narrows your attention, filters out distraction, turns chaos into sequence. When the door finally closes behind them, there is a sharp, almost electric stillness. The kitchen is quiet, but your body is not. Your heart continues to race. Your hands look for something else to do. Rest does not occur to you as an option. The energy has nowhere to go yet, so it redirects. Dishes are washed immediately. Counters wiped again. Chairs straightened. You move because stopping would feel like failure, or worse, waste. This is the performance no one sees. The part where the audience has left but the actor keeps moving because the momentum has not faded. The pill does not understand downtime. It only understands output, so you give it output. You clean what is already clean. You organize what is already in order. You look for small imperfections because fixing them gives the energy somewhere to land. Productivity becomes proof of worth in this space, not just externally but internally. As long as you are doing something, you are succeeding. As long as the house looks right, you feel right. The pill reinforces this equation beautifully. It rewards action with clarity, speed, and a sense of competence. It makes stillness feel suspicious and fatigue feel optional. The sensory world sharpens, colors seem brighter. The sensory world sharpens, colors seem brighter. Sounds feel closer. The clink of dishes, The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock all register with heightened clarity. Nothing fades into the background. Everything feels immediate, present, demanding. This sharpness is intoxicating in its own way. It makes you feel awake in a world that often feels dull and repetitive. And yet, beneath the efficiency, there is something brittle. The pace leaves little room for deviation. When a task takes longer than expected, irritation flares quickly. When something interrupts the flow, it feels disproportionate. The pill does not create patience. It creates momentum, and momentum resents obstacles. Still, from the outside, the morning looks perfect. Breakfast happened. The family left on time. The house is in order. You are ahead of schedule now, technically, though it does not feel that way. It feels like the day is waiting for you to trip, daring you to slow down. So you keep moving. You do not think of this as being on speed. That language belongs to another world, another kind of person. This is medicine. This is modern efficiency. This is what it takes to keep up. The fact that your productivity feels chemically enhanced does not trouble you, because productivity itself has become the moral baseline. If the pill helps you meet it, then the pill must be good. Breakfast ends, but the engine keeps running. The performance does not conclude. It simply shifts scenes. And as you wipe the last crumb from the counter, heart still racing, mind already jumping ahead to the next task, you carry with you the quiet understanding that in this house, in this era, doing more is not just admired, it is required. And as long as you can keep proving your worth through motion, the cost of that motion remains unexamined. Cleaning in 1957 is no longer maintenance. It is measurement. It is comparison. It is a quiet, relentless competition where the scoreboard is invisible but universally understood. No one ever announces the rules, yet everyone seems to know exactly how they are doing. You do not clean because something is dirty. You clean because someone might notice if it isn't. And once the morning pill has settled into your bloodstream, cleaning stops being a chore and becomes a mission with stakes that feel oddly, irrationally high. The vacuum comes out early, not because the carpet demands it, but because the sound itself signals diligence. The low mechanical roar fills the house like proof of effort, audible reassurance that something productive is happening. You move quickly, faster than necessary, tracing sharp lines across the rug that will vanish by evening, but matter intensely right now. Each pass feels urgent, as though dust itself is plotting against you, gathering in corners just to see if you'll miss it. The pill sharpens your focus until every crumb feels personal, every stray thread a challenge. You scrub surfaces that are already clean. You polish fixtures that already shine. The point is no longer improvement, it is prevention. The fear is not that the house will fall apart, but that it will fall short. That someone will see a smudge on the window or a faint ring on the sink and draw conclusions. Because homes in this world are not private spaces. They are public scorecards. They tell a story whether you want them to or not, and you are painfully aware that the story is being read. Baseboards matter more than they should. Windowsills feel loaded with meaning. These are the places people check when they want to know if you're keeping up. Anyone can clear a countertop. Anyone can hide clutter in a drawer. But the edges, the margins, the places most people forget, those reveal the truth. Or at least that's what the unspoken logic insists. So you crouch, scrub, wipe, and inspect, driven less by satisfaction than by dread. The pill transforms this dread into action. It converts anxiety into movement, fear into precision. You don't pause to ask whether this level of detail is necessary. The thought doesn't even arise. What matters is momentum. You clean faster, harder, with a single-minded intensity that borders on obsession but feels justified because it produces results. The house begins to look staged, almost unreal, like a photograph rather than a lived-in space. Outside, the neighborhood hums with parallel activity. You hear other vacuums through open windows. You see curtains twitch as someone checks the weather, or perhaps checks you. Lawns are trimmed in careful unison. Trash cans appear and disappear at the same times. There is comfort in this synchronization, but also pressure. Falling out of rhythm is noticeable. Being out of step invites scrutiny. Gossip feeds on these details. It is rarely direct. No one says her house isn't clean. They say things like, "She must be so busy lately," or "I hope everything's all right over there." These comments land softly but linger. They imply neglect without accusation, concern without support. And because everyone knows how hard this job is supposed to be, any visible lapse feels like evidence of a deeper failure. The pill keeps you ahead of that possibility. It makes the work feel doable, even exhilarating. You attack the bathroom with surgical focus, scrubbing grout until it looks new, bleaching surfaces until the smell burns your nose. The sting feels like accomplishment, proof that you're going far enough. You do not stop when the surface is clean. You stop when you are satisfied that no one could reasonably criticize it. Cleaning becomes less about the house and more about control. The world outside feels unpredictable, full of threats you cannot manage. The Cold War hums quietly in the background. News reports speak of distant dangers and looming uncertainty. Inside your home, at least, order is achievable. Dirt is visible. Solutions are immediate. The pill reinforces this by narrowing your attention to what you can fix right now. You move from room to room with a checklist, running constantly in your mind, not written but internalized. Curtains straight, cushions aligned, floors spotless. You rearrange objects not because they were wrong, but because they could be better. Better is always possible, and the idea that it might not be achieved feels intolerable. There is no finish line. Even when everything looks perfect, you keep scanning. The pill does not allow for rest. It amplifies vigilance. You notice imperfections you would have ignored before. A fingerprint on glass, a shadow where a shelf meets the wall. These small details take on outsized importance because fixing them gives your energy direction. Without direction, the energy turns inward, restless and uncomfortable. Visitors are not required for this surveillance to feel real. The possibility of visitors is enough. Anyone could stop by. A neighbor, a relative, the milkman. The idea that someone might see your home without warning keeps you in a constant state of readiness. This readiness is mistaken for pride. In reality, it is fear carefully disguised as diligence. You are aware dimly that this intensity is not shared equally. Some houses always look better. Some women always seem calmer. You compare yourself relentlessly, measuring your effort against their results. The pill encourages this comparison by increasing your capacity to do more. If you can clean longer, harder, faster, then falling short feels inexcusable. By midday, the house gleams. The floors reflect light. The air smells sharp and clean. From the outside, this looks like success. From the inside, it feels like temporary relief. The anxiety does not disappear. It simply quiets, satisfied for the moment that you have done enough to avoid judgment. Cleaning as competition does not offer joy. It offers survival. It is driven by the need to remain acceptable, to remain invisible in the right way. The pill turns this need into motion, into productivity that looks admirable but is fueled by constant vigilance. You wipe your hands, stand in the center of the room, and immediately start planning what comes next, because stopping would mean listening to the fear again. And so this cycle continues. Scrub, polish, inspect, not for pleasure, not for peace, but to stay ahead, to stay safe, to stay worthy in a world where cleanliness has quietly become a moral language and speed has become the only way to speak it fluently. Suburbia in 1957 looks open, airy, and friendly, but it functions like glass. Every house is visible, every routine is legible, every deviation is noted. You may have moved out of the city for privacy, but what you actually gained was exposure. Streets are wide, lawns are trimmed low, and sight lines stretch uninterrupted from one living room window to the next. There are very few places to disappear, and over time you stop wanting to. Disappearing looks suspicious. Neighbors watch neighbors, not out of cruelty, but out of habit. Observation is woven into the architecture. Front windows face the street. Kitchens overlook backyards that bleed into one another. You can see who is up early, who sleeps late, who takes in their laundry before a storm, who leaves it flapping a little too long. None of this is officially monitored, but all of it is quietly logged. Patterns emerge, reputations form, Mornings establish rank quickly. Who is outside first? Whose lights come on before dawn? Whose husband leaves for work with a pressed shirt and a packed lunch? These small signals ripple through the block. You tell yourself you're not paying attention, but your eyes track movement instinctively. Curtains opening, garage doors lifting, a vacuum cord snaking across a living room floor in full view of the street. Productivity has a silhouette, and everyone learns to recognize it. Lawns become another language. Grass is cut not just to be tidy, but to communicate competence. Too long suggests neglect. Too perfect suggests obsession. The sweet spot is narrow and constantly shifting. You mow when others mow. You edge when others edge. If someone fertilizes, you consider fertilizing. The grass itself becomes secondary. What matters is not being out of sync. Curtains carry similar weight. Open too late in the morning and it looks like laziness. Close too often and it suggests secrecy. Sheer curtains imply nothing to hide. Heavy drapes feel defensive. You adjust them without thinking, responding to an unspoken code that you somehow learned without instruction. Light becomes a performance. So does privacy. Routines are compared even when no one admits it. What time do you shop? When do you clean? How quickly do you respond to invitations? Efficiency is noticed. Energy is admired. A woman who seems tireless becomes a reference point. Not necessarily liked more, but watched more closely. Her pace resets expectations for everyone else. Keeping up with the Joneses is not about envy so much as survival. Falling behind feels dangerous. It invites speculation. If you are not matching the neighborhood's rhythm, the question is not whether you are different, but whether something is wrong. People don't ask directly, they ask sideways. Are you feeling all right? You seem busy lately. Everything okay at home? Concern becomes a polite disguise for surveillance. Energy itself becomes a form of status. Being busy is not enough. You must look capable while busy, cheerful while busy, calm while busy. Exhaustion is acceptable only if it is overcome quickly and quietly. The woman who powers through without visible strain becomes aspirational. Others measure themselves against her output, her demeanor, her apparent ease. This is where the pills quietly level the field. They are never discussed openly, but everyone understands their presence. The pharmacy becomes a social node. You see the same faces there week after week, exchanging small talk while waiting for prescriptions that no one names out loud. Doctors are generous, refills are routine. No one asks too many questions, because answers would complicate things. The pills act as an unspoken equalizer. They allow women with wildly different capacities, circumstances, and support systems to appear similarly competent. They smooth over disparities. They help everyone maintain the same outward rhythm. Without them, the cracks would show. With them, the neighborhood hums along at a consistent pace, each household reinforcing the illusion that this level of performance is natural. Energy becomes contagious. When one person accelerates, others feel compelled to match it. A neighbor repainting her porch triggers a ripple of improvement projects. A particularly immaculate house raises the bar for the block. You feel it immediately, a tightening in your chest, a sense that you should be doing more. The pill helps you respond to that feeling with action instead of despair. Privacy erodes slowly in this environment. You learn to narrate your own life as if it might be overheard. You clean not just for yourself, but for the hypothetical observer. You choose outfits that communicate stability. You time errands to align with acceptable hours. Even rest is managed carefully. Disguised as productivity adjacent, sitting still feels risky. Being seen resting feels worse. At the same time, there is comfort in the fishbowl. The constant presence of others creates a sense of belonging. You are not alone in this performance. Everyone is managing, adjusting, compensating. The pills make that collective effort possible. They keep the tempo high enough that no one has to slow down and ask uncomfortable questions. Conversations reinforce this dynamic. Compliments focus on output. You're always so organized. I don't know how you do it all. These remarks sound kind, but they reinforce the standard. To falter would be to disappoint not just yourself, but the image others have formed of you. The pill becomes a tool for maintaining that image. There is a strange equality in shared strain. Even as neighbors compete, they also recognize the effort required. They see the speed in each other's movements, the tight smiles, the constant activity. No one names it, but there is an understanding. This is hard. We are all doing what we can. The pills become part of that understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that natural energy alone is not enough. Suburbia's fishbowl does not allow for collapse. There is nowhere to fall without being seen. So the culture adapts. Chemistry fills the gap. Pills absorb the pressure that the environment creates. They allow the illusion of effortless competence to persist. House after house, street after street. You walk past a neighbor's window and catch a glimpse of her mid-clean, moving with the same intensity you recognize in yourself. For a brief moment, there is recognition. Then the curtains shift. The moment passes. The performance continues. And in this transparent world where everyone is watching and no one is really seeing, the pills keep the glass from cracking. Hunger in 1957 is no longer a neutral sensation. It has been rebranded, moralized, and quietly turned into an enemy. The war on hunger is not about scarcity, because food is plentiful. It is about control. Thinness has become shorthand for discipline, restraint, and virtue, and the body is treated as another household system that must be kept in line. A woman's appetite is no longer something to listen to. It is something to manage, suppress, and ideally eliminate. The message is everywhere, but rarely delivered harshly. It arrives smiling, wrapped in pastel colors and reassuring language. Magazines promise vitality, elegance, and self-respect through careful eating. Advertisements praise lightness, daintiness, and moderation. The ideal body is framed not as a physical state, but as evidence of moral success. To be thin is to be responsible. To be hungry is to have failed at self-control. Diet culture does not present itself as deprivation. It presents itself as health. Appetite suppressants are marketed as aids, as helpers that simply quiet unnecessary urges. They are sold alongside vitamins and tonics, discussed in the same breath as well-being. The language avoids words like denial or restraint. Instead, it emphasizes efficiency. Why eat more than you need? Why listen to hunger when science can handle it for you? Skipping meals becomes normalized, even admired. A woman who forgets to eat lunch is praised for her busyness, her dedication. The absence of hunger is interpreted as productivity. Eating lightly becomes a performance of virtue, a way to signal that you are in control of yourself as thoroughly as you are in control of your home. Meals shrink. Portions are watched. Desire is edited out of the picture. The pill plays a central role in this shift. Appetite suppressants flatten hunger into a distant, ignorable sensation. The stomach may growl faintly, but the signal is overridden quickly, chemically. This is framed as a victory. Hunger is no longer an instruction. It is an obstacle that has been successfully removed. The pill makes it easier to comply with expectations that would otherwise feel punishing. Magazines reinforce this constantly. Pages are filled with cheerful advice on staying trim, accompanied by images of women who appear effortlessly slender, smiling over plates that contain more garnish than substance. Diet plans promise results without discomfort, never acknowledging the strain of constant restraint. Hunger is either ignored or reframed as proof that the plan is working. Feeling empty becomes a sign of progress. There is very little room for nuance. Bodies are not allowed to fluctuate or respond naturally to stress, work, or exhaustion. Weight is treated as a fixed indicator of character. If it changes, something has gone wrong. The solution is never rest or nourishment. It is always more discipline, more structure, more chemical assistance. The body is expected to adapt quietly. Hunger, when it intrudes, brings shame. It is experienced not just physically, but emotionally. A desire for food feels like a lapse, a moment of weakness that must be corrected immediately. Women learn to eat privately, to minimize their appetite in public, to express disinterest in food even when they are ravenous. Wanting is something to be hidden. The social reinforcement is relentless. Compliments focus on thinness. You look so good lately. Have you lost weight? These remarks are offered casually, but they land heavily. They confirm that the effort is visible and appreciated. They also raise the stakes. Maintaining that appearance becomes another obligation, another area where failure feels unacceptable. Even health professionals contribute to this framing. Weight loss is praised without context. Appetite suppressants are prescribed without discussion of long-term effects. The focus remains on outcomes, not processes. A smaller body is assumed to be a healthier one, regardless of how it was achieved. The cost is invisible, or at least conveniently ignored. Food itself becomes complicated. Meals are no longer simply sustenance or pleasure. They are calculations. Choices are weighed, judged, and compared. A slice of cake is not just dessert. It is a moral decision. Indulgence requires justification. Restriction requires no explanation at all. This constant monitoring creates a background tension that never fully dissipates. Even when hunger is chemically suppressed, the vigilance remains. You think about food constantly, even as you deny yourself. The pill may quiet the stomach, but it sharpens the mind's focus on control. Eating becomes another arena where success is measured by how little you need. Children absorb these messages quietly. They watch what is praised, what is avoided, what is apologized for. They learn that hunger is something to overcome, not something to honor. The cycle continues, passed down without formal instruction, embedded in routine and language. The war on hunger is framed as self-improvement, but it functions as self-erasure. The body's signals are treated as inconveniences rather than information. Thinness becomes a moral virtue, and maintaining it requires constant negotiation between desire and discipline. The pill makes that negotiation easier by removing one side of the argument. In this world, to be hungry is to have failed, and to fail is to invite judgment. So you learn to stay ahead of hunger, to suppress it before it becomes visible, to keep your body as tightly managed as every other part of your life. And as long as the scale cooperates and the compliments keep coming, the cost of that war remains unspoken, absorbed quietly, one skipped meal at a time. The pharmacy in 1957 is not just a place to pick up medicine. It is a soft-lit checkpoint in the daily choreography of suburbia, a space where private strain passes briefly through public hands and emerges sanitized, bagged and labeled as routine. You walk in for toothpaste, aspirin, a birthday card, and leave with something far more consequential tucked discreetly into your purse. No one comments on it. That is part of the agreement. The pharmacist knows everyone's business, not because he is nosy, but because the system requires him to. He recognizes your handwriting before you reach the counter. He knows which doctor you see, how often you refill, and roughly how your week has been going based on how early you're back. He does not ask probing questions. He does not need to. The pattern tells the story. He is a witness, not an interrogator. This familiarity is not considered invasive. It is considered comforting. In a world where so much effort is spent maintaining appearances, the pharmacy offers a strange form of relief. Here the truth passes quietly from hand to hand without commentary. You don't have to explain why you're tired. You don't have to justify why you need another refill. The pharmacist slides the small paper bag across the counter with practiced neutrality, and that neutrality is a gift. The language used in these exchanges is precise and carefully coded. No one says the name of the drug out loud if they can help it. You say the usual, or I'm here for my refill, or simply offer your name. He nods, disappears into the back, and returns with exactly what you expected. The fewer words exchanged, the better. Silence here is not awkward. It is respectful. Prescription refills fold seamlessly into ordinary errands. You stop by after grocery shopping, before picking up the children, between appointments. The act itself is stripped of significance by repetition. If something is done often enough, it stops feeling exceptional. It becomes just another task on the list. Milk, bread, pills. The order doesn't matter. Other women are always there, too. You recognize them instantly, even if you don't speak. The way they stand, the way they glance at the counter and then away. There is an unspoken understanding among you, a shared awareness that needs no articulation. You are all here for different reasons, officially. Fatigue, nerves, diet, sleep. But beneath the surface, the purpose overlaps. This shared dependence quietly builds community, not a loud, celebratory one, but a subtle, stabilizing one. You see the same faces week after week and take comfort in the predictability. Everyone is managing something. Everyone needs help. The pharmacy becomes a place where that truth is acknowledged without being discussed. Politeness enforces silence. It is the glue that holds the whole arrangement together. You smile. You exchange pleasantries. You comment on the weather or the new display of greeting cards. You do not comment on the frequency of visits or the size of the bottles. To do so would break the spell. It would turn what is framed as normal into something that might require explanation. The pharmacist participates in this politeness expertly. He never lingers on a transaction. He never reacts to dosage changes. He does not express concern unless explicitly instructed to do so by a physician. His calm is part of the service. It reassures you that everything is fine, that nothing unusual is happening here, that this is all well within the boundaries of respectable life. Even the physical design of the pharmacy supports this function. Counters are high, bags are opaque, labels are small, conversations are muffled by ambient noise. Privacy is not guaranteed, but it is approximated well enough to maintain comfort. The environment is designed to make the extraordinary feel mundane. Over time, the act of picking up prescriptions begins to feel less like seeking help and more like maintaining equilibrium. You are not fixing a problem. You are sustaining a rhythm. The pills keep you aligned with expectations that show no signs of easing. The pharmacy ensures you have what you need to continue. There is a quiet feedback loop at work. The more normalized the pills become, the less reason there is to question why so many people need them. When everyone is taking something, no one feels singled out. Dependence dissolves into routine. Concern dissolves into politeness. Occasionally, there are moments when the silence feels heavy. A refill comes sooner than expected. A dosage increases. A second prescription appears alongside the first. These moments pass without comment. The pharmacist does not raise an eyebrow. The women in line do not stare. The system absorbs the escalation smoothly, as though it were always part of the plan. The pharmacy becomes a mirror of the culture it serves. Efficient, orderly, compassionate without curiosity. It does not ask why the pace is so relentless. It simply provides the means to keep up. In doing so, it helps preserve the illusion that the problem is individual and solvable, rather than structural and shared. By the time you leave, the bag is tucked away, the receipt folded, the interaction already fading from memory. You step back into the sunlight and rejoin your day, carrying with you a small, powerful symbol of how thoroughly dependence has been woven into the fabric of everyday life. Nothing dramatic occurred. No confession was spoken aloud. And yet, the exchange said everything that needed to be said. In this quiet, polite space, the system sustains itself. Everyone knows, no one speaks, and the pharmacy continues to function as the confessional of suburbia, absolving strain with chemistry and sealing it with silence, one refill at a time. Social obligations in 1957 do not sit on the edges of life. They are the framework holding everything together, an invisible schedule layered on top of the domestic one, equally demanding and far less optional. PTA meetings, bake sales, charity drives, church committees, book clubs, neighborhood coffees, Tupperware parties that are never just parties. These are not hobbies. They are duties, and failing to participate carries consequences that are never written down, but always understood. The calendar fills itself. A note comes home from school asking for volunteers. A neighbor calls with cheerful urgency about a meeting you won't want. A reminder slips into conversation that it's your turn to host next time. There is no formal enforcement, but there doesn't need to be. Opting out marks you immediately. Absence is noticed. Silence is interpreted. Participation is the price of belonging, and belonging feels non-negotiable in a world where isolation reads as failure. PTA meetings alone could qualify as a full-time position. They are framed as civic engagement, as being a good mother, as investing in the future. But they operate more like endurance tests, folding chairs in overheated rooms, endless discussions about fundraisers and policies that somehow always require more volunteer labor, more baked goods, more hours that you are expected to produce without complaint. You sit upright, nodding, taking notes, offering suggestions you don't have the energy to implement because disengagement would be worse than exhaustion. Bake sales bring their own quiet hierarchy. What you bring matters. Store-bought is a social misstep unless accompanied by an elaborate explanation. Homemade is expected, but not just homemade. It must look right, taste right, signal effort without appearing desperate. The baked good becomes a proxy for your competence, your dedication, your worth as a participant in the group. Compliments are currency. Silence is judgment. You learn quickly which recipes earn praise and which ones should never be repeated. Book clubs promise intellectual escape but rarely deliver it. The books are often secondary. What matters is the hosting, the spread, the living room arrangement, the ability to facilitate conversation while managing refreshments and projecting warmth. Reading becomes optional. Attendance is not. Hosting rotates, and when your turn arrives, the pressure intensifies. The house must look inviting but effortless. Snacks must be plentiful but tasteful. Discussion must flow, even if no one finished the book. Hosting itself becomes a performance art. Before guests arrive, the house is transformed. Furniture is adjusted. Decorative objects are repositioned to suggest casual elegance. Bathrooms are scrubbed to surgical standards. You rehearse where people will sit, what you will say, how you will move through the space. The pill helps here, sharpening focus, quieting nerves, smoothing the edges of anxiety into productivity. You move faster, smile more easily, feel capable of sustaining the act. Tupperware parties represent a particularly strange blend of commerce and obligation. They arrive disguised as social gatherings, but everyone knows the underlying purpose. Buying is not just encouraged, it is expected. Attendance alone is not enough. You must purchase something to demonstrate support, loyalty, and good faith. The products themselves are almost incidental. What matters is participation in the cycle. You buy because others bought from you. You host because you were invited. Refusal disrupts the rhythm and invites quiet resentment. The economic pressure is subtle but constant. Small purchases accumulate. A set of containers here, a donation there, a raffle ticket, a fundraiser contribution. None of it feels excessive on its own. Together it adds up, both financially and emotionally. You smile, sign the order form, hand over the money, because saying no would require explanation, and explanation feels more exhausting than compliance. Hosting requires emotional labor that is rarely acknowledged. You are expected to anticipate needs, smooth awkward moments, manage personalities, and absorb tension without letting it surface. If conversation lags, it is your responsibility to revive it. If someone feels left out, it is your fault for not noticing sooner. If the mood shifts, you adjust. This constant monitoring drains energy in ways that physical labor does not, but the pill masks that drain just enough to keep you functional. Smiles become tools. You deploy them strategically, holding them in place even when your jaw aches. Laughter is timed. Interest is feigned convincingly. Compliments are given generously because generosity lubricates social machinery. You cannot afford to be stingy with warmth. Warmth is what keeps you included. Exhaustion is hidden carefully. You do not admit how tired you are. You joke about being busy. You frame fatigue as a badge of honor rather than a warning sign. Everyone else does the same, creating an environment where no one ever seems overwhelmed, even though everyone is. The pill plays a crucial role here, allowing you to override signals that might otherwise betray you. It steadies your voice. It sharpens your attention. It helps you maintain the illusion that this is manageable. Buying becomes a form of social proof. The right items signal that you are keeping up, that you understand the codes. You display them subtly. The new container set on the counter, the matching serving pieces. These objects are not just functional. They are communicative. They say you belong here. You are participating correctly. Behind closed doors, the cost accumulates. Hosting drains reserves you did not know you had. After guests leave, the quiet feels heavy rather than restful. The house is a mess again, undoing hours of preparation in minutes. The pill keeps you cleaning late into the night, restoring order because waking up to disorder feels unbearable after you work so hard to present perfection. There is resentment here, but it rarely surfaces cleanly. It shows up as irritability, as sudden tears in private, as a sharpness you quickly suppress. You remind yourself that this is just how things are. Everyone does this. Everyone is tired. The pill makes it easier to accept that narrative, to keep going without asking whether the demands themselves are reasonable. Social obligations do not end when the event is over. They linger as expectations for the next one. Who will host next? What you will bring? How you will reciprocate? There is no completion, only continuity. And so you move from one obligation to the next, hosting, performing, buoyed by chemistry and social pressure in equal measure. In this world, belonging is earned through effort, expenditure, and emotional availability. The exhaustion that results is hidden behind polished manners and well-timed laughter. And as long as you can keep the performance convincing, the cost remains invisible, absorbed quietly into the background hum of suburban life. From a child's point of view, the house never really rests. It hums, it moves, it rearranges itself constantly around a figure who seems powered by something other than sleep. Mother is everywhere at once, a blur of motion that fills rooms before the child even realizes she has entered them. To small eyes, this does not look like strain. It looks like magic. The house runs because she runs, and the idea that this could ever stop does not yet exist. Children learn the rhythm of her footsteps before they learn the clock. They wake to the sound of cabinets opening, pans clattering, the radio murmuring news and music long before dawn feels appropriate. By the time they stumble into the kitchen, she is already fully formed for the day. Hair set, face ready, movements sharp and confident. Breakfast appears with theatrical speed, as if conjured rather than made. To a child, it feels like the day starts halfway through a story they missed. Throughout the morning, they orbit her activity. She ties shoes while answering questions. She corrects collars while listening to the radio. She remembers everything: lunch money, permission slips, whose turn it is to bring snacks. Her attention seems limitless, elastic, capable of stretching in all directions at once. Children do not see the pill. They see the outcome. They see a mother who never slows down and assume that this is simply how mothers are built. After school, the whirlwind continues. The door opens and the house is already alive. The vacuum roars. The washing machine thumps. The smell of cleaning products mixes with whatever is cooking. Mother moves quickly between tasks, rarely sitting, rarely pausing. She listens while wiping counters. She responds while sorting laundry. To a child, this constant motion feels reassuring. The house is under control. Someone is in charge. At night, when the world should quiet down, the movement does not always stop. Children wake for water or the bathroom and catch glimpses of her still working, folding laundry at midnight, rearranging cupboards, wiping surfaces that were already clean. She smiles softly and tells them to go back to bed. Just one more thing to finish. The child obeys, confused but comforted. If she is awake, everything must be fine. This confusion often masquerades as admiration. Children talk about their mothers as if they are superheroes. She does everything. She never gets tired. She always knows what to do. These statements are offered proudly, not critically. The idea that such constant effort might be harmful has not yet entered their understanding. Instead, energy becomes synonymous with love. Motion becomes proof of care. The pill's effects register as personality traits. Mother is organized. Mother is efficient. Mother is always busy. These qualities are admired, even expected. When she moves faster, speaks more sharply, or becomes briefly irritable, children do not connect it to anything external. They assume they have done something wrong or that this is simply part of adulthood. The chemical engine remains invisible. Over time, children internalize the lesson without instruction. Work does not stop. Rest is something you earn but never quite take. Being busy is normal. Being tired is weakness. They watch how praise is distributed. Compliments come when the house looks good, when events are hosted successfully, when schedules are kept flawlessly. They learn that value is tied to output. Even play becomes structured around this model. Children imitate the behavior they see. They pretend to clean. They line up toys neatly. They feel proud when they finish tasks quickly. They absorb the idea that stillness is suspicious, that idleness invites correction. Mother rarely sits without doing something else. and so sitting alone begins to feel wrong. When exhaustion does surface, it is brief and quickly hidden, a moment of tears in the kitchen, a sharp word that is immediately apologized for. Children notice these moments, but do not understand them. They sense something fragile beneath the competence, but the system moves too fast to examine it. The whirlwind resumes and questions dissolve. Energy appears magical because its source is never discussed. Children assume it comes from adulthood itself, from responsibility, from being a mother. They do not imagine that it is borrowed, that it comes at a cost. They only know that this level of effort is normal, expected, and admirable. As they grow older, this normalization hardens into belief. Overwork is not recognized as excess. It is recognized as maturity. The seeds are planted quietly, through observation rather than instruction. Children learn what adulthood looks like by watching someone who never stops moving, and they carry that image forward as a standard. Years later, they may remember the midnight cleaning, the constant motion, the house that never slept. They may reinterpret it as dedication, as love, as strength, or they may begin to see the cost. But in childhood, the whirlwind is simply the weather of the home, ever present, unquestioned, and deeply formative. Night is supposed to be the off switch, but in 1957 it rarely works that way. The house finally goes quiet, the dishes are stacked, the lights dimmed, the children tucked in, and yet the mind refuses to follow instructions. You lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant sound of a passing car, while your thoughts sprint laps as if the day never ended. The pill solved the daylight hours beautifully. It organized them, sharpened them, pushed them forward. But night has its own rules, and chemistry does not negotiate gently when it's time to stop. Racing thoughts arrive first, light but insistent. Did you remember to sign the school form? Did you put the leftovers away correctly? Was your tone sharp at dinner? Should you have said yes to hosting next week or no? The questions stack quickly, overlapping, refusing to line up neatly the way tasks did during the day. There is no checklist for the mind, no surface to wipe clean. You try to reason with yourself, tell yourself that morning will come whether you sleep or not, but the reassurance doesn't stick. The engine is still running. Sleep deprivation creeps in quietly, disguised as restlessness. You tell yourself you're just wired from a busy day, that tomorrow night will be better. This becomes a routine lie, repeated often enough to feel true. Hours pass in fragments. You drift for a few minutes, then jolt awake with another thought, another imagined failure, another plan forming itself without permission. The clock glows insistently, marking time you are not using properly. The pills were never meant to solve nights. They were meant to solve days. This distinction is rarely discussed. The energy they provide does not evaporate politely at sundown. It lingers, vibrating under the skin, keeping the body alert long after the world expects it to rest. You lie still because stillness is what night demands. But inside everything is moving too fast. Anxiety sharpens in this quiet. During the day, movement keeps it contained. At night, with no tasks to absorb it, the worry spreads. Thoughts turn darker, heavier. Small problems feel enormous. You replay conversations, analyze expressions, imagine consequences that may never arrive. The pill did not create these anxieties, but it stripped away the distractions that kept them manageable. You begin to associate bedtime with frustration. The bed becomes a place where you fail nightly at something as basic as sleeping. This failure feels personal, even though it is chemical, environmental, and cumulative. You blame yourself for not relaxing properly, for not calming down, for not being grateful enough. You try counting, praying, deep breathing. Nothing sticks for long. Morning arrives too soon. The alarm sounds like an accusation. You rise anyway, heavy-eyed, stiff, already behind. The exhaustion is real, but it is ignored immediately because it must be. There is no room for acknowledging it. Instead, it is reframed. Nerves, tension, just a rough night. These explanations soften the truth enough to make it bearable. The pill waits. It always waits. You take it again because the day requires you to function, and functioning has become non-negotiable. The effect is immediate and familiar. The fog lifts. The fatigue retreats to somewhere far enough away that you can pretend it isn't there. You feel capable again, which feels like relief, which reinforces the cycle. But the emotional volatility begins to surface. Small irritations provoke outsized reactions. A spilled glass feels catastrophic. A misplaced item triggers sharp anger followed by guilt. You swing between efficiency and fragility, held together by momentum rather than stability. The pill keeps you moving, but it does not keep you steady. You start to describe your state as being on edge. It sounds reasonable. It sounds temporary. It avoids the word exhaustion, which feels too final, too alarming. Nerves are acceptable. Everyone has nerves. Exhaustion suggests something is wrong with the system itself, and that is a thought you do not have time to entertain. As sleep deprivation accumulates, the cracks widen. Concentration slips in unexpected ways. You forget small things that you never used to forget. Names, appointments, items left in strange places. These lapses scare you, but only briefly. The fear is quickly overridden by the next task, the next obligation, the next moment that demands your attention. At night, the anxiety shifts shape. It becomes less specific and more pervasive. A sense that something is off, that you are slightly detached from yourself, watching your own life from a small distance. You feel keyed up and worn down at the same time, a combination that is difficult to explain and easy to dismiss as nerves again. The culture supports this dismissal. Women talk about being tired in the same way they talk about the weather. It's just how things are. No one lingers on it, no one suggests stopping. The solution is always adjustment, not rest. Maybe a different dosage, maybe something to help you sleep. The idea of reducing the daytime load is never seriously considered. And so the crash begins, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a slow erosion. Sleep becomes fragmented, anxiety becomes familiar. Emotional responses become harder to regulate. The pill continues to deliver what it promises during the day, which makes it difficult to question its role in the nights unraveling quietly around you. You move through the days sharper, and through the nights more brittle, held together by routine and chemistry. Exhaustion is masked, renamed, normalized. It becomes part of the background, something you carry without examining too closely because examining it would require stillness. And stillness feels dangerous when everything depends on your ability to keep moving. The crash is not a single moment. It is a pattern forming itself, night after night, day after day, as the cost of borrowed energy begins to surface. But for now you swallow it down with your coffee, straighten your shoulders, and step back into the morning, telling yourself that tonight will be different, even as the engine keeps humming beneath your skin. The shift from pep to panic is not announced. There is no clear moment where energy crosses a visible line and becomes something else. It happens quietly, in private, in spaces small enough to contain embarrassment, a pantry, a laundry room, a parked car with the engine off, places where you can fold inward without being seen. The tears come suddenly and without narrative. There is no single thought attached to them, no clear trigger that would make them reasonable. They surprise you as much as anyone else ever would. At first, you treat these moments as malfunctions, glitches in an otherwise functional system. You press your hand to your mouth, breathe hard, wait for the surge to pass. You tell yourself it's just a bad moment, just nerves, just fatigue that slipped through the cracks. The pill did its job all day. Surely this is just residue. You wipe your face, straighten your clothes, and step back into motion as quickly as possible, because standing still too long feels dangerous now. The outbursts follow a similar pattern. Sudden, sharp, disproportionate. A question asked at the wrong moment. A minor mess. A sound that repeats one time too many. Your voice rises before you can stop it. Words come out clipped, edged, harsher than you intended. The room freezes for a fraction of a second, everyone recalibrating. You apologize immediately, too quickly, smoothing the moment before it can settle into something real. The apology is reflexive, practiced, and deeply necessary. You cannot afford to be seen losing control. Shame attaches itself fast. It moves in after the emotion has passed, replaying the moment in precise detail. Why did you react like that? What must they think? You promise yourself it won't happen again. Promises become another form of labor, quietly exhausting. You become hypervigilant, monitoring your tone, your expressions, your reactions, trying to stay ahead of yourself. Secrecy thickens around these experiences. You do not talk about the crying spells. You do not mention the sudden waves of dread that arrive without context. You frame everything in acceptable language. You're just a little run down. Things have been busy. You laugh it off when you can. You minimize when you can't. The culture offers you plenty of scripts for this. Nervousness is understandable. Overwhelm is forgivable as long as it is brief. Panic, however, is something else entirely. Panic suggests loss of control, and loss of control is unacceptable. Eventually, the doctor visits resume. You sit in the same chair under the same fluorescent lights, describing your symptoms carefully. You mention feeling keyed up, having trouble sleeping, feeling emotional. You do not mention the relentless expectations. You do not describe the constant surveillance, the chemical dependence, the impossible standards. You describe the feelings as if they exist in isolation, floating free of context, because that is how the system understands them. The doctor listens, nods, and writes. The language is familiar. Nerves, tension, anxiety. These words are gentle enough to hold your experience without challenging the structure that produced it. The solution follows predictably. An adjustment, a new prescription, something to take the edge off, something to help you sleep. The symptoms are addressed efficiently. The cause remains untouched. You leave with another bottle, another set of instructions, another reassurance that this is manageable, that you are not broken, that you simply need balance. Balance in this context means more chemistry, carefully calibrated to counteract the chemistry you already rely on. Up during the day, down at night. The body becomes a switchboard, regulated externally, kept within acceptable ranges by pills rather than boundaries. The panic does not disappear. It reshapes itself. It becomes less explosive, more diffuse, a constant undercurrent of unease that hums beneath everything. You feel it in your chest, in your jaw, in the way your thoughts skip ahead compulsively. The crying spells become rarer but heavier. When they come, they last longer. They feel deeper. You hide them more carefully. Shame intensifies because you are now managing not just exhaustion, but the appearance of stability. You worry about being found out, about someone noticing the cracks, about failing publicly. This fear feeds the panic, which feeds the need for control, which feeds the reliance on pills. The loop tightens. There is a strange isolation here. From the outside, you still appear competent, productive, put together. People compliment your resilience, your energy, your ability to handle so much. These compliments sting in unexpected ways. They confirm that the performance is convincing, which means the struggle must remain private. You cannot reconcile the image others see with the reality you are experiencing, so you keep them separate. The culture reinforces this separation. Emotional distress is medicalized, individualized, and treated quietly. There is no language for systemic overload. There is no space to say that the job itself might be the problem. The acceptable narrative is that you are sensitive, nervous, temporarily overwhelmed. The unacceptable narrative is that the expectations placed on you are unsustainable. So the breakdown phase unfolds invisibly, not as collapse, but as management. Managing panic, managing mood, managing appearances. Each new symptom becomes another task to incorporate into the day, another thing to solve efficiently. You apply the same discipline to your emotional life that you apply to your household, and for a while, it works just enough to keep you going. The pantry becomes a refuge because it is enclosed and quiet. The shelves absorb sound, the door closes. You allow yourself a minute, just a minute. You cry, breathe, collect yourself. Then you open the door and step back into the kitchen, where everything looks normal. The transformation is quick, practiced, necessary. Over time, you begin to sense that something fundamental is misaligned, but the thought remains vague, slippery. Naming it would require slowing down, questioning assumptions, risking disruption. The system offers you easier alternatives. Another pill, another explanation, another way to treat the symptoms without touching the source. And so when PEP turns to panic, it does not prompt a reckoning. It prompts an adjustment. The breakdown is absorbed into routine, smoothed over with medicine and politeness. The causes remain unnamed. The expectations remain intact. And you continue forward, carefully managing the edges of your own unraveling, because stopping feels far more dangerous than breaking quietly. The shift happens without fanfare, framed not as escalation but as refinement. When speed begins to feel sharp at the edges, when energy turns unreliable and panic leaks through the seams, the solution offered is not to slow the world down, but to soften the individual. Barbiturates, sedatives, pills for rest, pills for calm, pills for smoothing the nervous system into something quieter and more manageable enter the picture gently. Presented as balance rather than replacement, you are told this will help you sleep, help you relax, help you take the edge off. The language is soothing, deliberate, designed to make the transition feel like care rather than control. Where the morning pill pushed you forward, these new medications pull you inward. They arrive at night first, prescribed to counteract insomnia, to settle racing thoughts, to restore rest that never quite comes naturally anymore. You take them cautiously at first, grateful for the way they dim the lights inside your head. The relief is immediate and unmistakable. Thoughts slow, muscles loosen, the constant internal vibration quiets. Sleep, real sleep, arrives like a gift you had forgotten how to receive. The success of this relief makes it easy to trust. Nights become bearable again. You wake feeling less jagged, less hollowed out by restlessness. The day still demands speed, but now there is something waiting on the other end, a chemical promise of peace. The cycle adjusts itself smoothly. Up pills to meet the day, down pills to survive the night. The body becomes a project managed through timing and dosage rather than intuition. Over time, the sedatives creep forward into the day as well, not officially at first. A half pill when things feel overwhelming. Something to take the edge off before a social obligation. A small adjustment that feels reasonable, responsible even. You are not seeking oblivion. You are seeking functionality without panic. Calm becomes the new currency. Energy, once prized above all else, begins to lose its shine. You no longer chase productivity with the same urgency. The manic efficiency dulls. Tasks still get done, but without the sharpness, without the feeling of propulsion. Days stretch out differently now. Slower, softer, less electric. You notice this change with mixed feelings. Part of you misses the clarity, the speed, the sense of invincibility. Another part welcomes the quiet. Emotional flattening follows gradually. Highs soften, lows blur. Reactions feel distant, as if occurring behind glass. You still smile, still laugh, still perform the necessary social gestures, but they feel less intense, less costly. Anger dissipates before it can erupt. Anxiety hums quietly instead of screaming. This is framed as improvement, stability, maturity. Acceptance replaces ambition without ever being named as such. You stop trying to be exceptional. Keeping up becomes enough. Surviving the day without incident becomes success. The pressure that once drove you forward loses its edge, not because expectations have changed, but because your capacity to feel them fully has dulled. This feels like relief. It also feels like surrender, though you would never use that word. The dependency shifts form quietly. You are no longer relying solely on energy to meet impossible demands. You are relying on calm to tolerate them. The pills no longer promise productivity. They promise tolerance. The ability to endure without breaking, without feeling too much, without asking why this all feels so heavy. Doctors frame this as progress. You are calmer now, sleeping better, less emotional. The fact that you feel less like yourself is not addressed, because it is not presented as a problem. You are functional. You are stable. The metrics that matter are being met. The system approves. Days take on a muted quality. Colors seem less vivid. Time passes differently. You move through routines with less urgency but also less engagement. Cleaning still happens. Hosting still happens. Obligations are still met, but the emotional charge is gone. You do not feel driven, you feel managed. There is comfort in this management. The sharp panic has retreated. The crying spells are less frequent. The outbursts are rare. You are easier to live with now, both for yourself and for others. That matters. That is praised. You internalize the idea that this version of you is better, more appropriate, more sustainable. And yet, something subtle has been lost. Desire flattens alongside anxiety. Joy becomes quieter, harder to access. You accept this trade because the alternative feels worse. Intensity now feels dangerous. Calm feels safe. The pills reinforce this lesson chemically, teaching your nervous system that muted is preferable to vivid. Dependency no longer feels like reliance, it feels like maintenance. You do not crave the pills, you schedule them, you incorporate them, they become part of the architecture of your day, as unremarkable as the appliances that hum in the background. The idea of stopping feels impractical rather than frightening. Why would you remove something that keeps everything running smoothly? Socially, this shift is barely noticed. You still show up, you still participate, you still smile. If anything, you are easier company now, less reactive, less intense. People comment on how relaxed you seem lately, how well you're handling things. These comments reinforce the choice. Calm is rewarded just as energy once was. Inside, you begin to operate on a narrower emotional bandwidth. This feels like safety. Extremes no longer ambush you. You float through days that feel softer, quieter, less demanding. Even though the demands themselves have not changed, you have changed instead. The chemical escalation is framed as evolution. First energy, then balance, then calm. Each step presented as reasonable, medical, necessary. At no point are you told to question the path itself, only to adjust along it. The pills adapt to the system rather than challenging it, and in doing so they make the system more survivable without making it humane. You accept this because acceptance is easier than resistance, because resistance would require energy you no longer have, or intensity you no longer trust. The pills have taught you that feeling less is safer than feeling everything, and so dependency shifts again, settling into a quieter, heavier form. By the time speed has fully given way to sedation, the transition feels complete. You are no longer propelled forward. You are held in place. Days pass. Responsibilities are met. The panic stays mostly at bay. This is presented as resolution, as improvement, as the end of a problem. But nothing has been solved. The expectations remain, the workload remains, the system remains intact. Only your relationship to it has changed, softened, muted, chemically negotiated into something you can endure. And in this quieter phase, where ambition fades into acceptance and dependence hides behind calm, the story does not end. It simply becomes easier not to ask how it began. Looking back now, the 1950s often arrive wrapped in a soft glow, like a photograph left too long in the sun. The colors feel gentler than they were. The edges blur into something comforting. Pastel kitchens, tidy lawns, smiling families frozen in mid-laugh. From a distance it looks calm, orderly, almost restful. But that calm was never natural. It was constructed carefully, reinforced daily, and held together by people who paid a quiet, invisible price for making it look effortless. Perfection was never just an aesthetic. It was a requirement, a moral expectation dressed up as normal life. A perfect home meant you were a good woman. Perfect children meant you were doing your job. A perfect marriage meant you were grateful enough. The image itself mattered more than the experience of living inside it. The myth promised happiness as a reward, but the work of maintaining that promise never stopped. There was always another standard rising just ahead of reach, another improvement waiting to be made, another way you could fall short without ever being told directly that you had. What history often misses is not the appliances, not the fashions, not the slogans, but the strength required to endure that constant pressure without language for protest. These women were not weak. They were extraordinarily resilient. They learned to function inside a system that demanded endless output with no margin for rest. They adapted. They found ways to keep moving. Sometimes that adaptation came through humor, sometimes through friendship, sometimes through silence, sometimes through chemistry. None of it was accidental. It was survival shaped by circumstance. The absurdity of the expectations becomes clearer with time. The idea that one person could maintain emotional warmth, physical beauty, domestic perfection, social grace, and constant energy indefinitely was never realistic. It was theatrical. It required stamina more than skill, and yet millions rose each morning and attempted it anyway. Not because they believed the myth completely, but because there was no alternative script offered. You did what everyone around you was doing. You measured yourself against neighbors who were just as tired, just as uncertain, just as quietly overwhelmed. Community formed not through confession, but through recognition. A glance at the pharmacy counter, a shared laugh that lingered a second too long, a neighbor dropping off a casserole without explanation. Support existed, but it was coded. It lived in routines and rituals, rather than open conversations. Everyone understood more than they ever said. Survival was collective, even when it felt private. There is something deeply human in that shared endurance. Not glamorous, not heroic in the traditional sense, just steady, stubborn persistence. Meals were made, children were raised, lives unfolded, even under pressure, even under strain. People found ways to care for each other in the spaces allowed to them. The story is not one of failure. It is one of coping within limits that were never chosen. From where we stand now, it is easier to see the cost. The sleepless nights mistaken for nerves, the exhaustion framed as a personal flaw, the emotional flattening praised as composure. We have better language now, better awareness, more options, at least in theory. We can name burnout. We can question standards. We can talk openly about imbalance. That does not mean we have solved these problems, only that they are no longer invisible. There is a quiet gratitude in that progress, not the loud kind that declares moral superiority, but the gentle kind that recognizes how much easier it is to make choices when you're allowed to see them clearly. Choice itself is a privilege these women rarely had. They navigated expectations without maps, adjusted their bodies and minds to demands that were never meant to be sustainable, and kept going because stopping was never presented as an option. This is not a story that asks for judgment. It asks for understanding. It asks for softness, for the recognition that people did the best they could with the tools they were given, even when those tools came with costs that were hidden at the time. The goal is not to condemn the past, but to acknowledge it honestly, without nostalgia flattening its complexity. As the story fades, what remains is not the myth of perfection, but the reality of endurance, the quiet courage of ordinary days, the resilience that showed up without applause, the humanity beneath the polish. That is the part worth carrying forward. So let the pastel image dissolve gently. Let the expectations loosen their grip. Let the women who lived inside that era rest, finally, outside the spotlight of perfection. The house is quiet now. The dishes are done. The day has passed. There is nothing left to prove. And with that, the story softens, slows, and drifts, leaving behind not a lesson shouted loudly, but a feeling understood quietly.